Well, hello everybody. How is everyone doing tonight? Let's go. We have none than Stefania Bell in the house. So, welcome to episode 92 of the Game Changers. I'm your host, Carla, and tonight I'm bringing the heat with none other than Stefania Bell. Her knowledge and insights are sure to elevate our conversation as I dig into the game behind the game. A huge shout out to the incredible TSA team for backing this mission of amplifying voices and sparking ideas. This platform exists because of visionaries like them and listeners like you. Whether you're here for fantasy football gold or simply love stories that shift perspectives, you're in the right place. The Game Changers is more than a podcast, it's a movement. Who is Stefania Bell? I'm thrilled to introduce a true bridge between medicine and the game. ESPN senior writer and on air injury analyst Stefania Bell, a trained physical therapist with a gift for clear, incisive explanation. Stefania translates complex rehabilitation and return to play science into the kind of insight every fan, coach, and fantasy manager can use. Stefania's journey began with a Bachelor of Art in French Literature from Princeton University, followed by a Master of Science in Physical Therapy from the University of Miami. After years teaching in university programs and treating athletes, she brought her expertise to ASPN in 2007. She became a familiar face on SportsCenter, NFL Live, and the long-running fantasy-focused football podcast, helping millions stay ahead of the injury curve. But now, Stefania is a familiar voice on ESPN fantasy platforms, including the Fantasy Focus Football podcast and Fantasy Football Now. She brings a hard earned clinical wisdom to every broadcast. She's also a decorated journalist, a two-time More Award winner, a two-time Newswomen of New York Sports Reporting Award winner, and the recipient of the FSGA Matthew Berry Game Changer Award in 2024. Tonight, I will ask Stefania to decode the biggest injury headlines, separate rehab fact from fiction, and share fantasy ready takeaways that could change your lineup. Please join me in welcoming the one and only Stefania Bell. Stefania, how are you tonight?
Wow, I'm blushing at the introduction. That was way too kind. It also means I've been around a long time. That's what it means.
Well, you deserve the best, you know that. And it's such an honor having you again on the show on the Game Changers tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back here. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. So, Stefania, being a woman in the industry, it's something really big. And I really want to talk a little bit about your personal journey, about maybe the impact that you did in the industry as well, and what kind of advice you can give to aspiring women. So let's start with what were some of the pivotal moments that shape your path from physical therapy to becoming a respected voice in sports media?
Well, the pivot was the thing, right? I mean, a lot of people ask me, how did you go from being a physical therapist and teaching in clinical practice to talking on ESPN? And it wasn't a direct straight line by any means, but I was teaching before, so I talked a lot about injuries to my students and anyone who would listen, I guess. But I always was a sports fan. I worked with athletes. You're always teaching when you're a physical therapist. And so teaching and sharing information was always part of my DNA. And then I also happened to play fantasy football pretty, fairly early in the game. I mean, it was before we were not scoring with Well, we were using electronic, scoring at that point. I think CBS Sportsline might have been one of the first that had it, but you would still be looking at box scores because information wasn't processed very quickly. And so the way we did drafts was pencil and paper, and it makes me sound ancient, but that's where fantasy football was. But the one thing was people were always asking me about injury information. And at the time, you have to remember, the internet was not like it is now where you can access information immediately. It was pretty limited in terms of what was available. And as far as reporting on injuries, there was really nothing. Every so often, there would be a local beat writer who would be talking about a player's injury. You really wouldn't get much other than what was the required NFL injury report. And so people in my league were asking me, what does it mean that this guy has a high ankle sprain, or how long does it really take a player to come back? And when the more I got asked, the more I figured out there was something there, and I wanted to figure out how I could provide the information to the broader public. It wasn't like I thought, oh, I'm just going to go to ESPN and do this. I really just wanted to write about it. And so I was trying to find a space where I could put information online that people would read. And I will spare you all the details of it, but eventually it was going to some of the FSGA meetings. And back then it was FSTA, Fantasy Sports Trade Association. And just basically pitching my idea. Like, people go and do elevator pitches. And
yes,
I was not going up with a solid elevator pitch like I'm trying to launch a company. I was just really trying to meet people who are in the industry and find out where there might be a space. And doing that a couple of times, got KFFL, for people who know their fantasy football history. KFFL, they were the first ones to give me a little spot, but I was basically writing inside somebody else's column. I would have like a little insert in that column, and it was just a tiny amount. Maybe I would take just a couple of players and talk about them, but it started getting some traction, and enough traction that right after that initial season, RotoWire, Peter Schenke offered me a job with them, and I will always be grateful to Peter and the RotoWire crew because they gave me a presence on their site that was highly visible. They, in magazines, I would have a cover story every season. They got me doing baseball. And when they did a deal with SiriusXM, back before there was a fantasy sports channel, and then they got it going. I started doing radio for them. And that really was my first on-air experience, my first on-air exposure. And I loved it. And just consuming sports the way I did. And I would watch when players got hurt and the way broadcasters would talk about the injuries. And I would think that is not, there's nothing about that sounds accurate. And I just felt like there was a space for somebody to be doing what I did. And I think also at that time, legal analysts were really kind of exploding because that was not long after the O.J. Simpson trial. And if you think back to that, that was really basically the birth of the legal analysts on television, because there were a lot of lawyers who had experience trying cases, and when nobody could be inside the, even though they were televising the trial, people couldn't see what the lawyers would see. So they wanted to know information. And it was the legal analysts who basically broke things down, or they would give examples of what might be happening based on their experience. And I thought, well, if you could do it for law, you could do it for sports medicine. And so the combination of seeing how that grew and just my experience in fantasy football made me think there was eventually a spot. And that's how I got into it. And from RotoWire, and knowing, I met Matthew Berry, and when he went to ESPN, that he was trying to build a team. And that's why I give him a ton of credit, because, he wanted a diverse team, and I was different. Just there weren't that many women playing fantasy football back then. And what I was doing was a different angle because I was focused on the injury aspect. And so one thing led to another, and I thought for sure when I came and had my audition that would be the one and only visit I would ever make to ESPN, but they took a chance and hired me, and here I am now. It's my 19th year with the company.
That's amazing. I love that. We do have a question, but I do have a follow-up question for that before we
Okay.
go to the question. So, are there any early challenges you faced as a woman entering the fantasy football and sports journalism space? And how did you navigate them?
It's interesting because I get asked this question so many times. And one
Yes.
of the things I like to remind people is that all my first opportunities came from men. There were only really men in the space. And so it's very important to me to acknowledge that without them opening the doors and being willing to, have a woman who is an analyst who sat alongside them, I wouldn't be here. So I give
Sure.
them all the credit in the world. And I think people assume that when I got to ESPN, it must have been difficult because I was, one of a handful of women. ESPN did not have nearly as many women, both on air, but also producers, directors. There were women for sure, but nothing like the number that we have at the company now. And so, people assume that must have been hard, but you have to remember in sports medicine, it's predominantly male too. I mean, that was always my work environment. Even though physical therapy is predominantly women, when you look at specialization in orthopedics or sports medicine, and physical therapy differentiates between the two, even though there's a lot of overlap. Those specialties in PT at the time that I did my board certification, women were outnumbered by men.
Yes.
And that is in a profession that is highly, predominantly female. So every work setting I was in, it was more men than women, and that I was always comfortable in that setting. And I could go into all the reasons why, but that was, that was not an issue for me. I feel like I just expected myself to do the job that I was capable of, and if I did, then there wouldn't be an issue. And I felt that way at ESPN as well. I was more terrified at ESPN because I was not, I come from a journalism background. I came from, I brought the medical knowledge, but I also, in my teaching, taught a lot about interviewing. So when you interview patients, it's critical in terms of being able to get the information you need to problem solve for them and to develop a relationship. And those skill sets are identical when you work in the media. So I told myself I could apply the same skill sets and I ought to be able to do the job. And then I leaned on people who had the journalism background who could help me when it was writing or, referencing things or whatever. But it really wasn't anything with the people I worked with where there was any kind of difficulty being a woman. Where it was
Yes.
a problem was with the audience. That's where I got the most pushback. And at the time we had chats, or people could post the comments on your blogs, or I had my own blog then. That's what everybody was doing on the website
Yes.
back then.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I could just, I'm sure you could guess the comments because they're sort of, timeless, what are you doing? Get back in the kitchen. You don't belong out here talking about football. You don't know what you're talking about. Women shouldn't be here. You don't understand the game. I mean, I could give you all of them
Yes.
in full color. There were some
We
that
still
were
hear them. Yeah.
far more obnoxious. And I would say there's some, but there's definitely less. And also we have the ability to filter out comments. And now that they don't post things on the site anymore, because that's not, that doesn't happen. So I'm sure we know that still exists, but I don't see it the way I saw it when I was brand new. And I had to actively disengage from that and just make sure that, I developed a thick skin very quickly. And I think my advice to anyone who was trying to get in the field, I would have a lot of young physical therapists who would say, well, I want to do your job. And I would say, okay, the number one criteria is you better have a thick skin because it's not always going to be easy.
Agreed.
That's where the pushback came from. So I had to prove myself to the audience. That's fine. I felt like my work would speak for itself, and I think it has. And You just have
Okay.
to learn to shrug off the commentary that is just based on your gender, because I don't think that's it's not worth processing.
I love that. So we have a question from I hope I pronounced it correctly. Shy and SoCal. Do you think Birdie will be back at full speed this week or less than 80%?
It's hard to get into percentages when you're not right there, and I think that's the tough part, is when we're not, we have to remember we're at a distance. And one of my little pet peeves is when players come back to play and people will say, well, are they fully healthy? Or sometimes they don't ask. Sometimes they just assume if they're back to play, they're like, well, so-and-so's playing, so he's fully healthy. But it's the NFL. By the time you get off after week 2, nobody's fully healthy anymore. Just ask all the guys who play. So it's relative. And the question for me is really, can they do what they need to do to be able to do their job effectively? That's really my criteria. I don't necessarily expect them to be 100%, and we're not necessarily going to know. In fact, we probably aren't going to know. So I like to look at, what are they doing in practice? Are they doing the things they need to do to be able to be on the field, etc. And then you look at historical comps. And if it's somebody who's coming off a major injury and we have data on how players perform after that kind of injury, then we can then we have a better prognostication, if you will, of how they're going to perform. In this case with Brock Purdy, here's what I'll say. He has a variant of turf toe. Turf toe, in case you didn't see it, we debuted this technology last week and showed what turf toe is with Joe Burrow. That is like the classic severe turf toe injury. But you have other ligaments down around your big toe that you can also sprain that give you something very similar to turf toe. It's not exactly identical. And if you're a quarterback and you have a toe problem, it's going to be really difficult to play. So I at least appreciate the 49ers held him out, because I think if he tried to push through it, it can become a far worse injury, and that would not be good for anyone. And I think they're going to be smart about it. It's early in the season. So if Brock Purdy isn't good enough to play, meaning they don't think he can get through 4 quarters, because it's not just testing it. It's, can you get out there and do 4 quarters worth of football and do what you need to do? Then they wouldn't have him go. But based on how they felt about him last week, unless there's a setback this week, I would expect him to be out there and essentially look like himself. The only thing is, I will say, sometimes they put these inserts into the shoe after you have a big toe injury. So they'll put, it's like a carbon fiber shank that goes under the big toe, kind of along that first ray of the foot. And sometimes players will feel like they have less traction because it's there so that they don't bend their toe as much. But if you think about how your toes grip the ground, that makes you tend to slip a little bit more. So sometimes you'll see a player struggling a little bit with their footing. He's not a wide receiver, and he's not a running back. So it should be a little bit easier for him. And if he's practicing, he's probably practicing with it now. So all of that is to say that, yes, I think if he's out there, I'm expecting a pretty typical Brock Purdy performance, but they're not going to want to put him in situations where he has to run a ton.
That's good to know. So the name is Chewy. I appreciate that. I butcher a lot of names, Chewy. Just letting you know. I'm like a.a. Aaron kind of teacher. So, Stefania, how do you triage an injury in the first 60 seconds of seeing it live?
Yeah, well, one thing you notice about me is that I don't usually put out what I think the injury is. So it's always been my position that I wouldn't do that. And you have to remember, when I got into this line of work, I was pretty much the only one who was doing it full time. There were a couple other people who were talking about injuries, but I was the only person who was full time working for, in this case, a sports network, but and doing injury analysis essentially full time. And I had a lot to lose. I mean, we already talked about, like, when I came in, I was untested. I was a woman, and I did feel the responsibility to represent women well, even if people weren't treating me any differently, but except for the audience initially. So I didn't think it was in anyone's best interest for me to be speculating. And part of the reason for that isn't just being afraid of being wrong, but it's that I truly believe it as a physical therapist that there's more information than what you see on the video. The video can be extremely helpful. And if I had a patient who would come in and again, dating myself, but nobody had iPhones when I was treating patients. The iPhone came out after I started at ESPN, or kind of right around that time. And so we didn't have, like, patients weren't coming in bringing you video clips of their injuries. If they had, I would have loved it, because it's exceptionally helpful. And athletes don't always remember what happened in the moment when they get hurt. And so they're trying to tell you to the best of their ability. But if you didn't see it, you don't have that the luxury of having that view.
Yes.
That being said, you put your name, you put your hands on the patient. If you're on a sideline, you see them. That's why they go in the blue tent. They're evaluating manually, and there's so much feedback you get from putting your hands on a patient, stress testing, joints, soft tissues, talking to the patient in that moment about what happened and what they feel when you're testing them. So absent all of that, all you have is the video, and the video sometimes lies. And so my feeling in the position that I was in when I was new was, do not do anything to ruin your own brand, for lack of a better word, and also nothing to tarnish the 4 letters of the network, because I felt like if I did, I was out there saying, oh, this has got to be what this injury is, no doubt, based on the video, and it was wrong. That's the thing that everybody remembers. They don't remember the other 25 times when you're saying what's correct. And, people get fooled. Even when you put your hands, like, here's a perfect example. Nick Bosa, we'll bring up a 49er age.
Yeah.
After the game, Kyle Shanahan said they did not believe he'd torn his ACL. But he was also quick to say that they were doing more testing, etc. Well, ACL testing manually is one of the most, sensitive tests you can do. There's a very specific manual test, and it's so reliable that more often than not, if somebody's torn their ACL, you can detect it right away. Every so often, you don't see it, either because there's muscular spasm or player's really strong. You just don't get that soft and feel like the ACL is gone. In Nick Bosa's case, they didn't think he'd torn his ACL. They do an MRI. He's torn his ACL. That's normal in medicine. That you put all the information together, that's how you arrive at the conclusion. But in that case, the video, he actually looked like he had an ACL tear. The way he stepped and his knee bobbled looked like an ACL tear. But it just goes to show you that all those things don't always line up. So in that case, video is helpful, but then the people who are with the athlete still didn't think the injury had happened. It took imaging to confirm it. For me, the first 60 seconds that you asked about, I'm doing what everybody else is doing. I'm watching the video. I will rewatch it 30, 40 times sometimes. I want every angle. And again, you only get what you get in the moment in the game. I also have, the NFL Plus. I go back and I look at the games so I can see the all 22 sometimes to see who came in and how a player might have gotten hit, trying to go back and look at how the injury happened or where it happened, just so I can see if there's anything that gives me information about the injury. That doesn't all happen in 60 seconds. So the first 60 seconds is just making a note of when it happened, what I saw, and I think, the most likely 1, 2, or 3 things is. But I will wait until it's reported or until I get information that tells me what's going on.
That's really important. Do you think that people who jump the gun in 60 seconds and talk about the injuries, are they trying to have kind of like a fame thing going on, just so they can get attraction?
I won't speak on their behalf. You'd have to ask them. I just know it's not for me. And people can be very good at it. I'd like to think that if you're in sports medicine, whether you're a physician who's doing it or a physical therapist or an athletic trainer, we all have experience doing this kind of thing, and you should be pretty good at knowing what it is on the video. I give you my reason why I choose not
Yes.
to speculate on it. And it's interesting because let's take an injury like an Achilles tear. When Austin Eckler tore his Achilles. And now I think because we're seeing them more and we're seeing them in multiple sports, we saw it when Jason Tatum tore his Achilles, it's NBA playoffs and it's right there for everybody to see. Damian Lillard tears his, and again, playoffs, everybody can see it. And then you see it on the football field. So, when I saw Austin Eckler, I knew, that's an Achilles tear. It is a class, and that's one injury where it's so classic in terms of how it happens, that usually a player does a step back. So you saw it in the NBA, these guys were changing direction or going to make a shot, and they push back. It's like you're taking a lunge and you're stepping back. And when you put your foot down, your back foot down, your Achilles is on this massive stretch. So under, this max elongation, and then they push off to propel themselves forward, and it goes from max stretch to max contraction, and the tendon fails. And when the Achilles tendon fails, it's like nothing else, because that's what basically anchors your foot to your leg. And so when that tears, there's nothing to advance you. The player falls. So you see it, they just go flat down on their face. And they usually look back at their leg, like they think someone hit it.
Yes.
They don't, the description is very consistent with athletes. Like, did somebody who fell on my leg, who hit me? They think a helmet came down on it. I've had baseball players tell me they felt like someone hit them with the bat. So it has this very typical presentation. I still don't want to say in my social media posts, oh, he obviously tore his Achilles, because there's just, one time in 100, it won't be quite that. But what I will say in that case is and they also on air had said that immediately they reported it as an Achilles injury. So I knew, okay, and they called him questionable to return, which I knew he wasn't going to. But I will say, this mechanism and what he did, et cetera, fits with, it's a max load on the Achilles. And so it's no surprise that he's out with an Achilles injury. And that to me is my preferred way of framing it.
Yes.
Because then I'm not saying, oh, this is what that is. That's, again, it's my preference. And that's just how I'm going to be going forward. And I know some people are frustrated because they say, well, Stephania doesn't tell you the diagnosis, right? Well, yeah, okay. If that I'm okay living with that as the complaint.
Agreed. Agreed. You want to give the truth more than you just gonna give your opinion on the spot, which I totally respect that. What's one common early rehab mistake fans should stop doing immediately?
What was that? I'm sorry.
What's one common early rehab mistake fans should stop doing immediately?
You mean if fans out there, if they have an injury and they're rehabbing, what's something they should stop doing?
What they should stop doing immediately?
Oh, ignoring the advice of their physical therapist. It's so individual. It's really hard to say, because on the one hand, I would say, some people are they just think, well, I feel good, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and, I know they told me not to weight bear, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because I feel fine. And then that ends up being a problem. Or, but the other happens too. Sometimes they're so afraid to move, whether something's painful, they don't want to, there's fear of aggravating the injury, and they've been told to go ahead and do, certain exercise or movement, and they don't do it, and then they get worse. So, it's sort of all over the place. I don't know that there's anything universal, I would say, but if you are under the care of a PT or anyone who's following you, I would say before you go and change your own program, you should probably double check. There might be a good reason why they're telling you to pump the brakes on something.
So, how do you weight an athlete's history of injuries when forecasting risk?
Strongly. The biggest predictor. I can't speak. This is what happened. This is what happens to me on Wednesday after I get sleep deprived Saturday to Tuesday. The biggest predictor of future injury is past injury, and so history matters. And even when athletes have recovered, to full return to performance, we call it, they pre-injury level of performance.
Oh, it looks like
it's taken me off there.
yes.
He never calls, and now he calls. Obviously, my brother does not watch anything I do.
We love your brother, though.
The athlete's history matters a great deal because
yes.
We always say that your body never forgets an injury. Your tissue has memory, and your tissue is never the same after it's been injured. It doesn't mean you can't get back to your prior level of performance if you're an athlete, but it does mean that the tissue has changed. And so, for example, players who have multiple hamstring strains, we know that means they're likely have scar tissue in their hamstring now. They are likely less flexible through certain parts of that muscle group. They may be more prone to aggravating that injury because there's less pliability of the tissue now. And hamstring injuries there's a lot of research being done on them now, but the thought is, they're multifactorial. There's the local tissue, but there's also the brain controlling, the firing of the muscles and the muscle firing patterns, even between the different components of the hamstrings. So if that's off and that hasn't changed, are they just going to come back and injure themselves again? So there's a lot that goes into that, but prior history of injury certainly has an impact. Or are they compensating for something after a big injury? If their movement pattern is a little bit off, guys coming back from an ACL, for example, are very prone to hamstring injuries. And there's, again, a lot of thoughts as to why that might be the case. But when they first come back and start playing, they are more at risk for secondary soft tissue injuries, especially the hamstring. So things like that, there is a lot that you sort of bake into the risk.
So what are the 5 red flags fans should watch?
I'm not hearing you.
With concussion. So what are the 5 red flags?
I don't hear you.
No? At all? How about now? You can't hear me? No. Backstage, Joe, can you hear me?
I lost. I don't hear you.
Yeah, Joe can hear me. Stephania, you can't hear me? Still can't hear me?
I lost my audio. Hang on.
I can hear you, but yeah, you cannot hear me. So let's wait for a couple seconds, guys, until Stephania try and find the voice. I'm gonna send her a private chat.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Shoot. Okay, let's see if we can figure this out. I don't know what happened. It just dropped out.
Private chat?
I'm going to go out and come back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, I know that we're waiting. We're going to be waiting on Stephania. Something happened. If you have any questions, please let us know. And we will ask her these questions when she comes back. I have a couple more questions about injuries. So we are going to let you know about some of the stuff that's happening. And we will definitely answer your questions. I do believe we have a question here somewhere. Someone was not trading. And James, I want to see your wife. I'm not looking at you in any way. I'm not staring. So I'm not. Say hi to the wife, James. Thank you for being here tonight. And everyone on here tonight. Thank you, you guys. We love you so much. So stay for a couple more minutes, guys. Something happened, a technical difficulty with Stefania. She will be in a couple seconds in. Yes, she went out. She's exiting and re-entering. So we're gonna wait to see. Uh, behave. Yes. Pardon-moi. Your pardon, James. Your pardon. So let's see, guys, what's gonna happen. Yeah, we love the show as well. Hopefully, Stefania will figure out what's going on with the voice. I'm trying to connect with you guys. So if you wanna send me some comments so I can talk, so we will not have a dead, time. That would be nice of you. I called out. Dennis, come on. Let's go, Stefania. Now, can you hear
Oh,
me?
I'm so sorry about that. Yes, hold on.
Listen, everyone is telling me to behave, but I cannot behave, Stefania. I can't behave.
Well, no, you shouldn't behave, and I'm so sorry about that. I have no idea what happened. None. You know?
It happened. Maybe the phone call just like did that. So what I was asking, yeah, we're gonna blame it on the brother right now. Um,
Normally I have this is why I have wonderful people around me at work who fix all the things of technology. And it's me just sitting here. I'm like, I just staring at my iPad, and I'm like, I have no idea why I stopped hearing you. So,
that's
but I'm
awesome.
back.
I'm happy you went out, and I was trying to tell you there's a private chat. We were telling you what to
Oh
do.
yeah,
I'm
I
so
saw it.
happy. So
Okay,
my question before you went out and you couldn't hear me,
disappeared.
it was, what are the 5 red flags fans should watch for with concussions? So we have concussions, and what's the 5 red flags that fans should watch about?
Well, I guess I would. I don't know if they're. I would say they're all red flags, but they're just kind of things to know.
Yes,
And my big one is that concussions are like any other injury in that they're unique to everyone every time. They are not a time-based uh, recovery. It's criterion based, and I think people look at it and they go, oh, well, players miss on average a week. So it takes a week to recover from a concussion. And while it is true that most players will miss one game, that is where the majority land. Um, but concussions present so differently for each person, and even 2 concussions in the same individual can behave very, very differently. So a player might have an injury one time and it's no big deal, and they're actually recovered within 3 or 4 days. And then the next time they have a concussion, it's multiple weeks because it's a different injury. So I think
yes,
people need to remember that it's not time dependent. It's criteria. They have to meet these criteria. I think if there are certain hallmark signs that we know a player has suffered a concussion. When you see that they are, we know when they lose consciousness, by definition, they've suffered a concussion, but you don't have to lose consciousness to have a concussion. So that's a big one. I like to remind people, like, I think people understand that now more than they used to, but
yes,
before it was, well, the player, he didn't go, he didn't get knocked out. So he's fine. And no, a lot of concussions happen without loss of consciousness. So that's another one that's really important.
yes,
And I think the third thing is that it is a brain injury, and we need to remember that. I mean, obviously, right? But it's actually classified, and they have these consensus documents that come out. And there was a lot of discussion, but they classify concussion now as mild traumatic brain injury. And so the seriousness of it is real. And I think that we just need to remember that the concussion recovery has made incredible progress, because now there's much more you can do in rehab. Like, I don't know why this took so long for us to recognize this, but if you had a sprain of your knee, you would think, I have to go to PT and rehab it. But with a concussion, the advice used to be just wait it out. And then it was like, okay, wait it out and don't do anything. Don't, stay away from TVs, phones, everything. Don't exercise. And then it was like, okay, now you don't have symptoms anymore. You can come back to activity. But what we're learning is that you actually can rehabilitate the brain. Like, of course you
Yes.
can. Because when we have other severe brain injuries, we know that there is rehabilitation that we do. But with concussion, I think people thought that you weren't supposed to for some reason. So I think that's another thing to know, is that we can rehabilitate these injuries by doing progressive cardiovascular work and things like that. I don't know. I didn't answer your question really, because you were looking
No,
for
you did.
red flags, and I'm not really giving you those. But I don't know. Like, I think I don't know that I have red flags in that way. It's more like, these are the things that I like people to be aware of with
I
concussion.
appreciate that.
And I don't know if there was something else that you were thinking of in particular. But I would say this, because I think it's important for people listening, especially if you have kids who've had a
Yes.
concussion. I get a lot of questions about that, because youth athletes and, like, concussion is fairly common injury in a lot of youth sports, certain sports
Yes.
some more than others. And that is, there are concussion specialists now, like just what I was talking about, and just, having the kid rest or stay home from school for 5 days, and then, okay, they're fine, go back. There can be things that are subtle that we might not pick up on, that kids might have a hard time expressing. And there's just been so much development in this field with sports neurologists who are trained to evaluate these things and make recommendations. And then there are also physical therapists who have, done extra training. There's now, continuing education in concussion rehabilitation. And I would tell people, if I had a kid who had a concussion, I would want them to see someone like that, just to get ideas about what you should be doing before you re-enter your sport.
So I was misdiagnosed with a concussion when I got into a really bad accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to add to what Greg is asking as well at the same time. The
Yeah.
steps that the NFL concussion protocol, there's a lot of protocols that people like talk about concussion. And being a swimming official as well, we do have protocols we have to follow when someone have a concussion, especially an athlete. But if there's a misdiagnosis, if there's something that it didn't show at the beginning of a concussion, but it showed after,
Mm-hmm.
what is the protocol for that? And how does it typically take? How long does it typically take to clear someone with a serious concussion?
Well, so there's a couple things in there. One is,
Yes,
if so, I would say the NFL, and we get numbers every year about the concussion rate, which is down. And I think there's a lot of credit to some of the safety rule changes and
yes,
equipment. Helmets are better. The Guardian caps in practice and the preseason. And when there is an injury or even a suspected injury, the immediate evaluation and pulling the player and all of those things, I think it has really helped. But sometimes there's a delayed presentation, or a player will get pulled and scanned and they will pass the immediate testing, because it is really a cluster of tests. There is no definitive diagnosis yet. It's coming. A biomarker test is coming, and that's ultimately going to be something that I think is going to change how we do this, because you're going to have, right now, you can't get a blood test or a saliva test that tells you definitively had a concussion, but that's
yes.
coming.
Nice.
Until
Nice to
then,
know.
we have to go by this cluster of signs and symptoms and potentially some objective, there's objective evaluation in there, balance testing and some other, cognitive processing tests that are quick, but it's not going to catch everything. So there might be some players who pass those tests, return to the sport, and then a day later, they come back and they say, I have a really bad headache, or I'm not feeling well, I'm nauseous, or was this after the game, or I felt like a fog, whatever. The symptom list is a mile long, and it's very, very, again, very, very different. Sometimes people just say they feel off, they didn't feel great, and that can be enough because it can be this processing issue. So, again, like as far as the NFL, since that was the question, they come back in, they speak with their medical staff, and they might call them and say, look, I'm not feeling great today. They have them come in and go through again those evaluation tests, and then they might get something that's picked up then. So they're monitoring. Even a player who's had was pulled for an evaluation, even if they cleared it, they mandatorily are rechecked again the next day. But then some might not even be pulled, and then they develop symptoms later, and they will go ahead and self-report. And players, quite honestly, are so much better about self-reporting now than they ever used to be, because it used to be a big stigma attached to that, like you were weak if you reported. And now I think just with education that we've changed how things are perceived, and players report, teammates report, officials report. Like, there's a lot more people involved in the reporting of concussion. If you look at what in the question, the 5 phases of recovery.
Yes.
This was really something Rick Burkholder, who's the head athletic trainer for the Kansas City Chiefs, put this together. I think he did it in conjunction with someone else, but I don't remember who that was off the top of my head. But Rick Burkholder was involved in it. It was basically a way of giving people some benchmarks as far as progressive activity before returning an athlete to play. And again, I would just really emphasize it's not time dependent. So people wonder, well, if there's 5 phases, it must be 5 days. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that.
No.
Because you might be stuck in a phase for weeks, and you're not getting, when you hear about these guys who are out multiple weeks, they might not ever be able to progress past the 2nd or 3rd phase before they reproduce symptoms, and they're not cleared to move on. So it basically has to do with like symptoms at rest and not having symptoms at rest, and then graded activity. So it might be, just light cardiovascular work, and how do they respond to that? So like walking on a treadmill, or light biking with no resistance. And because you stress your cardiovascular system, that stresses the brain. And so the idea is, if you're doing that and you reproduce the symptoms, then okay, it can't go that far. But if you do that and you have no issues, then you can move on to the next set of things. And so it goes through progressive exercise, and it might even be something as subtle as keeping them inside for the first day versus letting them go out to the field, where there's all kinds of stimuli around, and that can be stressful to the brain. And then as they clear those steps, they go through progressive activity, then they can work in drills, then they can, ultimately they can get cleared for contact. They have to be cleared by the independent neurological consultant. So in addition to the team physician clearing them, they have to be cleared by an independent neurological consultant before they're eligible to return to play. So those are basically the steps of the concussion protocol. And again, they're not time specific, they're criterion specific.
Yes, like with me, I do agree with what you're saying. I got post concussion after a year. So after 1 year having anything, like nothing, it happened that I was misdiagnosed, and then I have the post concussion, which is like it opened an eye on the injuries that we see on the spot, and then you see them like after 2-3 weeks playing again. So it like, for me, it's kind of like scary, especially when they have the concussion going on.
Yeah, and we see with the players who've had multiple concussions, and that's why they're concerned. You start getting concerned, especially when they have several that are in close proximity. You
Like
wonder,
Tua.
were
Yeah.
they really fully recovered from the first one before they had the second one? Is this truly a new injury, or is this something that they were more prone to having? It's also just like we see some players will pull a hamstring, pull a groin, pull a quad. Their soft tissue is more susceptible to soft tissue injury. There are some people who it doesn't seem to take much and they have a
Yes.
concussion, and other guys will take huge hits and
Yes.
they're fine. So why is that? Why is it so different from one person to the other? We don't fully understand that.
Yeah. So I want to shed the light about Greg's question first, and then we can go furthermore. He's asking if ESPN will send any representative for the FF Expo next year, and is there any chance you will be there? Which I'm eager to hear.
Yeah, every year I get asked, and every year I wish I could go, but it's always during training camp, and that's
Yes,
my obligation is to training camp. And the time now with the NFL is so there's fewer preseason games,
it is.
so there's less opportunity to get to the teams, and we have some obligations of our own. This year we did two live shows plus our fantasy football marathon, so all of it is all around the same time, and that makes it hard. And I usually don't know my schedule till like a week before it comes out, so
I
it's really
remember
hard to
that.
say that I know that I have a very hard time committing to. And I just tell people once we get to about July 15th, I can't make a commitment because I'm at the mercy of whatever happens with football. So I hope so, but I can't say for sure.
This coming year is gonna be like a little bit earlier, so
Yeah, we're
I'm
hoping that
hoping.
helps. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hoping you can make it. So, if injuries had fantasy scoring, what injury would be a zero point 0.5 PPR nightmare?
um, oh, I'm trying to think of how I would qualify it for the injuries that are the problem. I mean, I think hamstring has to be the injury nightmare because
Yes,
it's the least predictable of everything that we have now, and it's the highest rate of recurrence of any injury out there. An ACL tear is an awful injury for the athlete. We don't like to see it. We know it means the end of their season. It means surgery. It means, it's a lot, it's a heavy duty rehab before they come back. But we've also gotten really good at rehabilitating these injuries. Surgery techniques are amazing, and athletes are coming back better and stronger than they used to. This injury used to be, you wondered if they'd ever be the same, and now we pretty much expect them to come back and be the same, although not necessarily right away. Whereas with hamstring injury, it's all over the place. You can have a mild one that might be 7 to 10 days. You can have a really bad one that takes you a couple months, and you can be somebody who's somewhere in the middle, but it never really gets 100% better, and then it just becomes this chronic recurrent thing. So you're out multiple times. And so
I
to
agree.
me, that would be your injury nightmare, would be the hamstring strain, because there's this whole range of outcomes and very,
Yes.
very hard to predict.
Let me ask you that again. What phrasing in an injury report should immediately trigger trade panic? Especially that everybody's talking about trades.
Let's see. Um, I mean, like trade panic, like you want to trade for someone because now your guy
Yes.
is going to be out. Oh, I think high ankle sprain. That's an easy one because the player's going to be out for a while. I mean, every so often we see somebody who comes back within a couple weeks with a very mild high ankle injury. Sometimes that's possible, but more often than not, it's going to be a 4 to 6 week injury, and they may struggle when they first come back. And so I'm looking right away to, you've got to fill the gap potentially of the person who's gone. So you need to have somebody, you have to plan on potentially 6 weeks and maybe them not being quite themselves. Especially, it's funny. People say they want guys to come back sooner, but you really
Yes.
don't want them back sooner if they're not 100%. And 100% is relative. I already said that because, at this point in the season, we're into week 4, nobody's 100%. But to the point where their performance level is pretty consistent with what you saw pre-injury, when you first come back from a high ankle sprain, especially if you're a running back, a receiver, defensive back, we don't, have defensive backs, most of us, unless you're playing in some Ivy League. But those positions are hard because they have to cut, they have to stop on a dime and twist, and that is one of the hardest things to do after that injury. So that's one where I'm, if you have somebody who tears an ACL, they're done for the year. If you know somebody who tears an Achilles, they're done for the year. So those are obvious. But the ones that
Yes.
are less obvious to me are the ones that are going to cost you 6 weeks.
100%.
And 6 weeks, if you have a lousy 6 weeks, you're not making it to the playoffs. So I think the season's sort of in 2 parts. And the first part for fantasy football is you just got to make it to the playoffs. And the second part is then excelling through. So you're positioning yourself in the playoffs and then hopefully winning your league.
What's the funniest injury related superstition you've seen affect fantasy lineups?
You know, I mean, you mean as far as like an unusual injury that
Yes, like
is something?
it's a superstition sometimes, like injury related. Like some people, oh, that this guy is injury prone, maybe, or something like that. The funniest injury related superstition you've seen affected fantasy lineups.
I don't know. I think, gosh, I don't really have a good answer for you. I'm trying to think of something clever and funny, but I don't have. I mean, it's like you're saying it. People get worried that some guy's injury prone, so they're just like, I'm not drafting it. It usually comes from the
Yes,
draft, right? People are like, I'm not drafting him. I mean, we saw it with Christian McCaffrey this year. It was very polarizing. You were either like me and you were all in on him, or you were like some people were like, I've had it with Christian McCaffrey. I've had too many injuries, or I drafted him first overall last year, and look what it did to me. People carry that over a lot. Like they get scarred by bad fantasy experiences, and so all of a sudden they are like they don't want that player anymore. They're not touching that player because that was their experience. I see Greg is saying the curse of 370. That stuck around for a long time.
yes,
It really did. Like the idea that, and the numbers supported it. So it was the player who'd had, I think 370 was the amount of touches in the year, and then subsequently had a down year or was injured the next year. It's interesting. I've been working with my friends at the Predictors who do a lot of the very sophisticated analysis and data points around injury. And, you would think that running backs with higher workload would be more prone to injury, but actually what they're finding is that they're actually, the running backs who are the starter, the high, like the less, the ones who see the field less frequently
yes,
on a regular basis, so your backup running back, like their injury rate is actually higher. So it's a weird sort of oxymoronic thing that you don't expect, because when you are on the field, we call that an injury exposure. The minute you take the field, your injury risk is up, right? Obviously, because you're on the field. So whenever you step on the field, your injury risk goes up. But in terms of injury rate per touch or per play per play that you're on the field, the ones who are carrying the higher workload seem to actually be doing better. So there might be something there in terms of muscle memory and consistency and just getting used to playing football. I think it's why we see so many injuries when guys first put on pads, or they haven't been. We talk about guys who are on contract holdouts who don't get football in the preseason. Then they come in and they have to ramp up very quickly. They're at a higher risk for injury. I was a little worried about James Cook initially, but so far he's been really good. He's kind of past that window where I would associate it with the any missed time in the preseason. So those are the kind of things that we look at. But as far as the superstitions, I think that was probably a good call on the 370. But other than that, I just think it's prior battle scars. People say I don't want to draft this player anymore because I got
Yes.
burned last time, and it may not make sense, but that's how they feel. And like I'm a big believer, like you should follow your gut on these things because you don't want to be miserable the whole time.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I want to talk a little bit about the awards. How do awards like More and News Women of New York shape your change or change your work?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know that they have changed my work. I certainly am appreciative for the recognition of it. And I think
Yes.
what it does do is it's been good to be able to show my employer, like this is why we do this. This is why these stories are important. This is why the injury analysis that we're doing here matters because it's being recognized. And I would say that there, thank you for bringing those two up because they're very different. The Moore Award comes from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, and they actually give journalism awards. And if you think about it, orthopedics, we're talking about it related to sports medicine, but orthopedics is like, if you need your hip replaced, that's orthopedic. You can have trauma, that's orthopedic. Like orthopedics covers broad spectrum of things. And
Yes.
they used to do a big ceremony when I got the first one. It was really nice, and you're seeing some of the work that other people are doing. Stories that might appear on nightly news or local write-ups in newspapers, which well, we could go on. We don't have that so much anymore, but like a local story about somebody's recovery from something or about a new form of treatment or something that's they are highlighting in the medical field. And so to have the academy recognizing the work of journalists in educating the public about orthopedics that's a very big deal. And for me to get that award, knowing how much I have a relationship with orthopedic surgeons, just from my work as a physical therapist to my work now, that was really important to me. And the Newswomen's Club of New York is for women in the tri-state area who covered all sorts of different things. I mean, it's incredible. When I saw some of the people winning awards there, I mean, these are like national names I've seen, Diane Sawyer and Juju Chang, but they're also looking at people who are doing reporting in war zones. And
Yes.
it's the gamut. And my award was in the area of sports reporting, as you might expect. But to me, the reason it meant so much was it was a journalism award. And for the people who thought that I couldn't do the job because I didn't have the background as a trained journalist, those were particularly meaningful to me. And it's not to say that I have so much respect for journalists, and there's part of me that wishes I had gone, I'd had some formal journalism education. Everything I've done has been post-professional for me. But I think it's because I respected so much that I've sought out the help to be able to do my job better, to report those stories. One was for the Alex Smith piece, and to me that was my E60 on Alex Smith and his injury and recovery. It's probably one of my favorite things I've done because you rarely get access like that. I mean, that is a gift that he and all of his physicians and his family gave us. And you can't tell the story without the access to that. So, being able to do that and the satisfaction of bringing that story to air was incredible. To get awards from both those places for it was, just like the cherry on top.
That's awesome. And we have another award as well, the FSGA Matthew Berry Game Changer Award. What does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, anyone who was there at that meeting saw. I don't do it very often, but I got pretty emotional getting that award from Matthew.
Yes.
Um, I mean, part of it was my father had passed away just a couple weeks before that, and
Loss.
Matthew knew my dad, and so he Matthew had actually called to tell me that I was getting the award when I was with my dad because he wanted me to tell him. So it was one of the last things I was able to tell my dad, and so I think that's why getting that award that day in Boston was particularly emotional. But it was also because without Matthew, I'm not at ESPN. You know, Matthew's clearly a game changer. That's why the award's named after him. I mean,
Yeah.
he always tells his story about how he's as surprised as anyone that he does what he does for a living. So for me. To get that award from him, who opened the door for me at ESPN. And, Matthew lifted me up a lot in the beginning, especially when I needed the credibility in the fantasy community and also at ESPN. So ESPN was already, you know, they bought into him. They bought his website. Like he was, even though he hadn't been there that long, he was established. He was the reason they were building that team. So for him to say, no, Stephania is good and she can do this and this is why, and then to kind of help elevate me while I was there, um, that was part of it. But he also did it in the fantasy community when people were questioning from fantasy purposes whether I belonged there or not. It wasn't just ESPN, it was some of the people in the fantasy community who didn't necessarily think um, that I belonged there, for lack
Yes.
of a better phrase. And so, I owe him everything in terms of getting in the door. I mean, obviously, I had to do the work to be able to stay,
Of
but
course. Yes.
he gave me those opportunities, and it opened a door for me to do something that now I see a lot of other people doing, which
Yes.
is great. I mean, there's plenty of room for more than one injury analyst. I'm still the only person that does it full time, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
Um,
You are.
and I think for me, that's really important because I spend a lot of that time gathering information and, writing and doing the stories that I do, in addition to just showing up for the fantasy podcast and fantasy football now on Sundays.
I love that. What story do you still want to tell that you haven't had the space to yet?
I have a whole book of stories. I keep notebooks of all these story ideas that I have. So I don't know that there is one that I want to tell because there are actually so many. I mean, the thing that I learned is that storytelling is um, like that is my favorite thing. It is now my passion. In the Alex Smith piece, the E60 piece, that really showed me that number one, I could do it, but it was the power of the storytelling because that story, I mean, people talked about it all the time, how much they were blown away by it. And so I don't know that there's a single story that I really want to tell, but I think what I want to do, that's sort of the treetop view, is
Yes.
I'd really like to do more that's the access inside the world of, and I say medicine really loosely because to me it's the umbrella over performance, like sports performance and training and just everything from youth to professional athletes. But like I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know this by now. It's no secret, but Jaden Daniels is really into using virtual reality for training, and I think it's part of why he's so good. I mean, I think it is literally part of what makes him so good. And he used this virtual reality. So as his rookie season, as he was going from one stadium to the next, he would already have seen the stadium because he'd already simulated everything. So even like knowing where the scoreboard, what the clock on the scoreboard in whatever stadium they were going to, he knew where it was. So nothing was unfamiliar to him. That's incredible mental training on top of getting the reps for football. But I also think that there's some element of that that's probably injury preventative on his part
Yes.
to a degree. Because again, we know that repetitions help you be more efficient in everything that you do. And you're more at risk when things are new and novel and you're processing a lot of different things at once. So things like that, stories like that, to me are really fascinating and interesting. And it's not just this guy tore his ACL and we're going to follow him back in rehab. So I think the other thing I would love to peel the curtain back, and it's hard because, it's just not everybody wants to share these things, but it's just all the people do that they never get credit for in the world of sports medicine and
Yes.
performance, and what it takes to keep these players on the field and things like that. So hopefully, I'd love to have my own series on that stuff, but we'll see one day.
One day. Let's keep talking about your writing and stories. If you wrote a chapter on resilience, what would its opening line be?
Look at you and these questions, my goodness. Yeah.
I don't look like a teacher, do I?
Yeah, no, it's terrific. It's just you're making me think, and this brain it's in Wednesday mode.
You're
It's like
tired.
very, maybe on Friday morning I'm actually a little bit more with it. Opening line on resilience. What would it be? Oh, Carla, I I don't know. I'm terrible guest because I can't come up with these things.
No, we can go back to that. You're fine. You don't have to answer it. I get it. You have so much going on, and I keep like popping stuff here and there. So, let's talk about your favorite guilty pleasure TV show during recovery downtime.
Okay, that I can go.
Yes, let's
a
go.
lot to say about that. Well, it really depends on where we are, like what time of year. So I'm a huge White Lotus fan, so that's been fun. But that's done right now. But I've just been getting into The Pit. Have you seen this? The Pit?
Yeah, the pit. I did.
Yeah, I love that show. And I think I love it for all the reasons you would imagine. For people who haven't seen it, it takes place in an emergency room at a busy level 1 trauma center in Pittsburgh, hence the Pit. And the head physician in the ER is played by Noah Wiley, who was a resident in the original TV medical show ER that that so many were built on Grey's Anatomy and all that came afterward. But ER, which was based in Chicago, he was the young resident. And I think that through line of him being the resident and now being the guy who is supervising the entire ER, it's just so believable. He's older now. He's like it's awesome. But I was reading something. The reason I started the show late, I was reading something about how they were coaching the actors in terms of to make these things realistic. And they were teaching them about how, not just the language of the ER, but how to manipulate the language in ways that the physicians would actually talk or the nurses would talk in the ER. And then they do these single camera shots where they're following him around as he's going through the ER, which also makes it feel more realistic. And so even though, there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief when there's like a trauma after trauma after trauma, like the ER is so busy.
Yes.
Most of them aren't like that all the time, but it's really well done, and I'm so glad Noah Wiley won the Emmy because he deserved it.
Wow.
And so I love shows like that. I'm a big documentary watcher, so I I feel like I watch
True.
with two sets of eyes, like a
Yeah.
fan, but also trying to learn, what, because now that I've made two documentaries, I'm like, in both mine took almost 2 years to do from start to finish. And clearly there are, you know, much more significant documentaries out there that span, much longer periods of time. But I'm really interested in how people tell stories, so I like to watch things like that.
Yeah.
Then for the series, I want something where I can just go in and like it sucks me in, and I don't have to think about anything, and I don't want it to be about football. Although I do watch the quarterback and things like that. I just want a break from football.
I love the doctor as well, the one that she loses her like
Oh yeah, yeah. I haven't watched that one yet.
yes, I love this one too. It's really interesting. I like it a lot. So that's something that I love to watch. Let's talk about the most embarrassing onset moment that became a favorite anecdote later.
I don't know if they become my favorite. There are, I'm always afraid of saying, and this is like not a thing that now that I'm going to put this out there, it's going to
Yes.
happen. This is what I'm afraid of. I should not put this in the universe because it's probably going to happen. But I remember when my friends who know me know that I can have a potty mouth. And so my biggest fear when I first came to ESPN was that I was going to swear on the air by accident. And I'm like, it's a Disney company. I'm like, I'm going to get fired. And so what would happen is before I'd go on the air, it was like in my brain, every swear word I could think of was
Oh
in
my
there.
God,
Like I would see them
kidding
all.
me?
Like, and I'd be like, don't think about. I'm trying to get them out of my head because I'm thinking when I'm talking, and I'm learning how to use an IFB. The earpieces that go in your ears so you can hear your producer, and which camera I'm supposed to look at, and all the things that fluster you. Where normally I might just swear, and I'm like, don't do it. All I could think of would be like, don't swear, don't curse. And so it almost I would feel like I was talking in slow motion because I was so nervous. And while I'm talking, I'm seeing like F-bombs in my head. And I'm
Oh my
thinking, I cannot say this on the air or I'm going to get fired. And so that's still happens, not to the same degree. Like I said, I probably shouldn't have said this here because now I'm doomed.
no, I know.
But
Listen, I hear
it's
you.
so funny.
As a teacher, I have the same, like the kids are always like like sharing the F bombs in the class. I'm like, if I'm not saying it, don't say it. And I'm
You're
like,
right. I
like
know
it's always in your head.
that,
So
and
it is crazy.
there are some medical words that are tricky, and if
Yes.
you say them incorrectly, you know that it's going to become a meme, and I don't want that. So I have to pause before I say them. So there are things like that. The only like the things that have happened on set with me. We had a missed high five once on fantasy football now, and I forget. It might have been me and Matthew. I can't remember, but we got hammered for that for a long time because it was one of those where we went to high five and like missed. But I mean
Oh,
that was stupid. It wasn't even that funny. There really have not been like that bad. It's more the things where you think of.
yes.
I see Greg saying, "Doesn't the teleprompter help you not swear?" I don't use a prompter. I don't know why people think that I use a prompter. I don't. I speak. The only time I use a prompter, it's very rare. And I used one um, last weekend when I was introducing the Burrow segment on VR because I wrote it out because you're you're on a time thing, so it's there to cue you because you have to lead into a taped segment. So I have like 2 sentences on the front end and 2 sentences on the back end. And it's
Crazy.
in there, but you're not reading it word for word. It's in there, but you're sort of making it your own. But it's so funny because people are like, "Oh, you must when you look in the camera, like on Sunday when you're doing a show, the stuff's in the prompter. No, it's in here. Like I do not use a prompter. I don't read script. I speak. So
I love that. I love that. Stefania, I want to have like a couple more questions before we end the episode. I know I'm taking my time with you because
that's
this is such
okay.
an amazing, amazing episode together. So, if there's a wearables ethics line you would draw for play and monitoring, any wearable like ethics line you can
Yeah.
draw for player monitoring?
Well, it's interesting because there's where I would draw the line. Some players are willing to go. Um, it has changed so much so fast because when wearable technology first started coming out, the Whoop bands and the Aura rings and things like that, when the early days of wearable technology, the
Yes.
players were really worried about their data, who was going to use it, who was gathering it, where would it go. But I think it was more related to systems like Catapult is a system that a lot of teams had, where it was capturing player data and they were using it for to look at fatigue levels. Like if certain performance metrics start changing, does that mean we should have a player sit out for a few reps, maybe not go as hard the next day, all of that. And there was a lot of discussion. The Players Association got very involved. I mean, it was really about how are you going to identity protect this data. And it's interesting to me because I feel like players, maybe as they feel like they've been able to capture more ownership for themselves, they don't seem as concerned about it. Um,
Yes.
and yet I would be concerned. Like I think, well, I'd be concerned. Like, where is this going? I worry more about, and if this is just me personally, but I wouldn't worry as much about the teams having it. And I know what they were worried about early. For example, if you're a player and you have metrics that are being captured by them that are showing different or showing a decline or something, and they're worried like, is this going to affect my contract status? Is this
Yes.
going to be shared for the next time when I go as a free agent? And then that might affect my ability to my earning potential. I totally understand that. I don't think that was ever, really going to be used in that way. I think certainly on the medical side, they're
Yes.
very good about protections. So I'll just say that. But now the way you capture data and it goes in the cloud, the stuff you keep on your phone and who's getting into your phone and who's sharing when you're using an app on your phone, and how much privacy do you really have with that and where might it be being shared. I worry more about that stuff than the things that
Agree.
are in-house. So I think that's an individual question for people. When I'm sure that this is what everybody's saying, is that they have protections built in. But for me, if I'm using anything like that, that's what I want to know.
Yeah. I love that. Should college teams adopt standardized see? They're gonna do that for me. Rehab benchmarks before pro transitions, in your opinion?
I don't, you know, I mean, do you mean as far as like that they have? Well, let me ask you to just elaborate on it for a minute because I'm not sure I'm understanding it the way you're asking it.
So the college teams,
Mm-hmm.
if they adopt like standardized rehab in the benchmarks before they go to pro transition, should they do that before, or they just can transition to pro? That's it, in your
No, I,
opinion?
I think they can look. That's not even really the concern right now
Yeah.
because with all the player movement in college, I don't think that anybody is really keeping tabs on anything with them. You have players who have, they can move so much that it's really become a problem. This is something that not very many people are aware of, but it's become a problem where I have a friend who's a surgeon at an SEC school, and he was telling me about operating on a player in the middle of 1 week, and 3 days later he was in the transfer portal and gone. And he had no way to follow up with him. And he just operated on his shoulder, let's say. And that's a pretty critical time post-op off a major surgery. And a player goes in the portal, they go to another school. Now all of a sudden you don't know where they went because they don't have to tell you, and that communication is cut off. So unless at the next place they reach back out to bridge that, but they go to that place and they might take care of the player and be like, hey, we got this, like, don't worry, you don't have to communicate with them anymore. Imagine that you're the surgeon and you're completely cut off from the player. You have no idea what's happening. So you have no idea what the outcome is going to be. And as he said to me, he also works at the combine. He goes, what if that guy has a terrible outcome and they're showing up at the combine and people are like, oh, wonder who did that surgery because his shoulder looks terrible. And you're sitting there going, yeah, but I never had any follow-up with the patient. Like none of the aftercare, nothing was under my supervision. He was gone. So there are real issues that are medically related that are tied to the transfer portal. And there has not been, like in the NFL, there's a standardized electronic medical record. So when you go club to club, they have access to the medical records. They can share them. Makes it easy. If a player goes from this club to that club, they can share the records. If you're in college, there is no standardized EMR. And so it becomes a whole thing of, can you get the information? Can you share? And I think they're working on that. I know like the SEC is actively working on it. And I think whatever the SEC does, others will follow. But there are some challenges there. I think that's what the combine is for.
Yes.
Is for the medical screening. So I don't know that you're ever going to have rehab benchmarks that would be universally accepted by different people. Sort of do things. I think there are best practices in medicine that most people understand, but when they get to the combine, that's where some of that stuff gets exposed.
Yeah, that's true. What question do you wish interviewers ask more often?
Well, not what's the first line you'd write in the chapter on resilience. Because that's a hard one that I still don't have the answer for yet. But you know what? I'm going to write you a note like probably tomorrow or the middle of the night. I'm going to think of something very clever that I couldn't think of tonight. I really think that I wish more people asked questions like this that are a deeper dive. I think what's hard, and it's especially hard in TV, but it's really any media. And, I originally was a writer and I'm a reader, and it's hard to know that people don't read as much anymore. They don't care for long answers and I think that's where the nuance lives. And I live in grays and nuance, and that to me is really important in the work that I do. And people want the quick answer. Oh, it's an MCL. How long does it take for a guy to get back? Just tell me how long it takes for a guy to get back. And it's like, well, that's not a reasonable answer to that question, because if they tore their MCL, did they tear it on, the proximal end, the high end, or the distal end, the low end? What grade is it? What does tear look like? How, what was the history? What's the rest of their knee look like? Did they have arthritis? All these things. Did they also have some kind of patellar instability that then makes it harder for them to recover from this? And so the short answers they're not my favorite, but we're sort of living in this world where you're trying to appease the people who want that, and that's the way people consume information. But I miss some of the, I wish people would read more. I wish I could write things that, people would read. And sometimes I still do, I still
Yes.
write. I still write some very long form pieces that come out when I did a couple last year on, where Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams rehab with the physical therapist in Jacksonville, who, he's definitely onto something with the throwers. I mean, it's unbelievable. And, I spent time out there and we did a sports center feature, but I also wrote this longer piece that came out, and I'm like, that you just really want people to read that. And to that end, I wish when we did interviews that more people would dive into some of the details of those things, and the deeper questions, because I think to me, that's what's interesting.
It is interesting.
But I am biased, of course. So
I love every single answer you did. You answered me tonight. Couple more questions before we're done. 3 words that describe your current season.
my current season.
Chaotic, crazy.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was thinking, but that's every season. I use the
True.
word underwater a lot, because I
Yes.
always feel like I'm just like, it's like you're in the boat, you're trying to empty the bucket. So underwater,
Still breathing though.
that's one
Still
of my
breathing.
words is underwater. But fun. I am having fun this season, and last year was hard because my father had just passed away, and I
Yeah.
was functional, but it wasn't as much fun, for obvious reasons. I really missed him, and he was my biggest champion, and he loved everything about fantasy football. He got so into it when I got into it. So I'm having a lot more fun this year. So although I'm underwater, it is fun. And I'm trying to think of what the third word. Exhausting. Exhausting. I feel like I say I'm tired a lot.
Like my questions tonight. Exhausting.
No, you have great energy, and that is all you need to be able to carry
I
a
appreciate
show.
it.
Yeah.
I loved seeing you last year, and I do remember you had so much going on last year when I saw you in Boston. But it was the highlight of my day, honestly, when we saw each other
you're
at
too
Scott's
kind.
Festival. Yeah, it's always is, and we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna go for that cup of coffee at some
Yes,
point.
we are.
We live, we're like 5 minutes away.
I know. So this
We
is
have
how we
to
have
do.
to see each other, is through
We
the
have to make it happen.
iPads. Yeah, we will. We definitely will.
Definitely. So, one more question, Stefania, before we end the show. And this question, every single guest answered it, and people wait for it, especially Mel. So, my question is, what like what can you give me something that maybe you did at an early age, or a secret that you never spoke of before that you want to share tonight on the show?
Uh, I, well, a secret.
Yeah. Or
I
something
don't.
that you did at an early age, but you never shared it live, or some people don't know about it.
I tells you that I'm a pretty open book in that regard, but I'm trying to think of. I'm not coming up with anything good. I hate to tell you. I mean, these are all they're just like little kid. I'm trying to think if there's a good one. You know what's going to happen is we're going to click off, and I'm going to go, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't tell her that.
Even kid stuff, it's fine.
I will tell you one thing. My brother would kill me, but he's not watching anyway, as we know, because he called me and ruined our connection earlier. So he's oblivious, so he won't notice. But I'm claustrophobic. Like, not, it's not like I can't be out if there's, a crowd, but I don't like being I've had incidents in elevators. Some of the RotoWire guys know about that. I was stuck in a Vegas elevator up at the like
Oh my
top roof floor and coming down. Um, and so I've had a couple elevator incidents. I've had 3 or 4 emergency landings on airplanes. And so, I don't like being in confined spaces a lot, but it all goes back to how do you get this out of people? You're good at this because you said people always tell you something. Well, I was little, so my brother is 6 years younger than me, and so he would whatever we play. So we were playing hide and seek one time. Like he was littler, so it was more fun for him. So I had to be like clever. And my mom said, "I'm going out to do an errand. I'll be right back." Um, like behave.
Yeah.
So of course so I tell my brother, okay, we can hide anywhere in the house, but whatever we do, if I hide, those trunks you would take to camp, like the old trunks with like the latches that would.
Yes.
I had this trunk that I loved to go to camp because it had like Snoopy stuff all over it. I loved Snoopy and Peanuts. It was black and white, I remember. So it had like the handles or like the flip up things that you latched them down, but it also had like the one lock that you would just flip up. And I told my brother, whatever you do, if you hide in there, you can't flip the lock up. And sure enough, I pretty much told him to lock me in the trunk by telling him, whatever you do, don't do this. So I hide in the trunk thinking he's never going to find me and I'll just pop out and surprise him because I kind of made it like that was off limits. But I was in the trunk and he came over. He's like, I still remember his little voice. Hi, Steffi, I know you're in there. And then, whoosh, and up goes the lock. And now I am locked in a trunk. And my mom has just left to go do errands. And it's summer. And it's like in California. So a zillion degrees. And I'm freaking out because then my brother's like, okay, come on. He was little. He's like, come out now. Like, I can't. I'm in here. And so with the thing that he had just flipped up, you needed a key to open it. And
wow.
So I couldn't get out. He didn't know where the keys were. And I knew what the keychain looked like. I can still remember it had this little like eagle thing on it and it had the keys to the trunk. But it was up on like my mom's dresser and I knew he couldn't get it. So he was just like, now not only was I locked in the trunk and scared to death, but I can't watch him. Like, I don't know what he's going to do. And I'm supposed to be babysitting him and not the whole thing. And luckily, this is, the universe intervened. My mom came back and she forgot something to take with her that she wanted to do on her errand. And so when she came back and my brother's like, that's in the trunk. And my mom's freaking out, like, oh my God, what is that? So she knew where to get the keys and she unlocked it and let me out. But I have never been the same since. I was scarred for life. People wonder why I'm claustrophobic, and I'm like, because my brother was a little, and locked me in the trunk and thought it was funny. And he still laughs.
Oh my God, that's crazy. I love it.
If she'd been gone as long as she was going to be gone, I don't know if I'd be here talking to you about fantasy football. I might not have made it. But
oh my God. I love this story. So you said something that Andy always tell me. How can you take away like stuff from me without me even like want to tell you this stuff?
I know.
I've heard it before. I love this, Stephania. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And we're gonna always blame the brother from now on. Always blame him.
It's forever. And he's still like, here we are, grown adults, and it'll still be a thing that we'll get in a fight over now. And I still yell at him or get pissed at him. And I'm like, you locked me in a trunk. And he's like, you asked for it. Like, you were supposed to be the responsible one. You told me not to do it. Why wouldn't I do it? I was a boy.
I love it. So before we wrap up, Stephania, please let our listeners know how they can connect with you online and stay updated with your work.
Well, pretty easily. The Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. I'm on Monday and Tuesdays now, and then Sunday mornings, Fantasy Football Now. We write a buzz file on ESPN. But basically, if you go to the ESPN and the fantasy page, you'll see that if you scroll, there's something that says buzz in it, like the buzz file. And when there's injury notes, I'm dropping them in there and trying to do it a little more frequently now. So if there's an update on, like, I probably got to go write something about Ricky Pearsall now because he's on the injury report, yet another 49er. So I'll just put like a couple sentences in there. So it's not really long, but
Yeah.
we have kind of this scrolling thing where you can get news. And that's kind of a new thing we've been doing since last year. So I put stuff in there. And then my social media through Instagram at Stephania Bell, and I've got the same thing. I think it's basically the same on Blue Sky and at on X now. It's at Stephania _ ESPN. So
Yeah.
that's where I hang out mostly.
Everybody doesn't want the show to end, but I know I want to be respectful for your time. I took really my time tonight with you, Stefania. I don't want it to end as well, but I
Very
cannot
kind
thank
of
you
you.
enough.
You've been a great interviewer. You got me to, again. That's what great interviewers do, is they get you to share things that you did not think you were going to share. The only one other thing I would add is that I just started hosting a podcast series for my professional association for
Nice.
APTA Orthopedics, so American Physical Therapy Association, and then our specialty group at orthopedics, so APTA Orthopedics. And I've posted some of it in reels on my Instagram from my first interview in launching this series. And I interviewed a PT who made her, she kind of did what I did and like found this niche, but all her focus has been esports medicine. And a lot of people don't realize how many injuries there are in esports. So if anyone out there is like really interested, because over there on those podcasts, I can take a deeper dive into some of the topics that will cross over to football. And I actually have a really interesting guest coming up on a future episode who is very involved in taking care of professional athletes. And she talks about that in more detail. So if anybody likes those things, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see me post about them there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I can share your post as well so people can see it. I know I don't have a bigger platform, but
Oh no,
I would love to
every
share your stuff
share helps,
definitely.
believe me.
I
And
agree,
I
100%.
really I love when that sort of thing gets out to a broader audience because
Yes.
not everybody's going to be interested in that deep of a dive into some of the sports medicine things, but some people really are, and they want more than the short things that they can consume, in
I
one spot. And so that, for me, that's what this series with my association is allowing me to do, is to kind of dive into some of those topics as well.
I do believe sports medicine is really important, especially if you follow, like a football and you want, and especially who plays fantasy football, they want to know
Mhm.
more about the injuries and how they can go furthermore in any situation that comes up. So it's really important, definitely.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Thank you as well, Stefania. Thank you for joining me and Stefania tonight for this episode of the Game Changers. I hope today's conversation gave you a fresh perspective, not just on fantasy football, but the game of life. Mark your calendar. Rick Wolf will be joining me next Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You don't want to miss this one. Big thank you for JC and Joe for their behind the scene magic, and to the powerhouse team of TSA for making this platform possible for me. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to subscribe, leave me a review, and follow us on social media. Stay connected and be part of the Sports Affiliation, a community where every fan, thinker, and change maker belongs. Until next time, keep challenging the game and making your mark. This is Carla signing off with Stefania Bell tonight. We wish you a pleasant evening. Good night, everybody.
Hmm.